This podcast is a conversation by Julie Benetti and Susan Barbaro and is a production of VI Alliance, copyright 2019. And this chart-busting hit, Alone Leave Me, courtesy of New Threads, is available everywhere. Hi, this is Julie, and I am here with Susan, and we are on our 7th part of Neville Goddard's The Power of Awareness, and we are having a hearty conversation, and will propel everyone, including ourselves, through this one as we start off in chapter 22 with persistence.
Can I just say one thing? This group of chapters is probably what I've been talking about throughout the whole podcast series, because it does go into which is what I love, which is always the challenge of, so what if you don't get what you want?
And he has the answer.
I love it.
Woo-hoo.
Go ahead.
So rolling into persistence here, I love the statement he has. A desired state of consciousness cannot rise to you. You must rise to it. And I love that phrase because think of all the things you rise to. And, do those align with the concept of yourself? And do those align not only with the concept of yourself, but, where your life is and where you want it to be? And if they don't, and if none of that aligns, then, like Neville Goddard says, you got to go back to the concept of yourself and change it.
That's the to-do. Mm-hmm. That's to do. And the last line, your assumption to be effective cannot be a single isolated act. It must be a maintained attitude of the wish fulfilled. It's persistence. And he talks a little bit about other reasons, but if you give up right away, this is the real work of life, is really working on this to better who you are and to do more. And this is a constant. It's the real only work of life.
I'm still in the chapter because I think this is, again, I'm going to say the word powerful in the persistence, because, you think about how you utilize persistence, and he does share some biblical stories, and he talks about where desire springs from and the awareness of ultimate attainment. And persistence is maintaining the consciousness of that desire already being fulfilled, resulting in it being fulfilled. And it's funny, I had a hard time not thinking about that backwards, because what kind of proof could you ascertain through that? But if you think about it backwards, in your desire and in, your realizing and reaching that awareness of the ultimate attainment, it's impossible for you not to, because it will be fulfilled. So, it's that statement we kind of say simply, you're okay. And, if you look back to years ahead when you're like worrying about stuff and struggling about stuff, like you're here now. So something occurred that you're okay. And isn't that proof then that you're okay? So it's kind of like a little bit of a mind challenge from that sense.
So you're saying what you and I were arguing about before. You just proved my point.
Well, I'm not arguing anything.
No, we're not. But I'm saying that's what I was saying before.
Where this relates, and again, it's not a personal you versus me or opinion or judgment or anything. It's in the ascertainment of the pure essence of what he's talking about, and it's just solely, for you, internally, for you, which can propel you when you don't look anywhere outside. Okay, so you had stated the last sentence in the paragraph of the chapter on persistence. And, it's great because you take that whole paragraph, because most times you turn around and you say, people, not like me, or you're all around me, and why is that? And how they're acting to you, and is it due to, your lack of persistence and your assumption of your life already being as what you want it to be? And it's funny because that whole statement and how he kind of flavors us with the power of us just being persistent for ourselves gives us the understanding of kind of sort of why this is all around us and what it propels us to. It's almost like, to me, there was a lot of like a moving backwards understanding of like how can you not take all this into account and have it really go cellular, to take a terminology that you were saying in the last podcast, because that's why it's all around us. And for some reason, I think this also is the perfect opportune time for him to put in, this chapter on the case histories. And it intrigues me, okay, because it's kind of right there, and you would think, maybe, I don't know, you would think or not, but, wouldn't you put that at the end of the book and say this is how it all worked, or what? And I have, read this book before, and I was quickly skimming through the case histories for our conversation, and each one gives an explicit account of how someone has used their powers of assumption for themselves to reach their desired goal. And whether it be, there's a gentleman in the military and he wants to get out, there's a little boy who wants a puppy, and there's a person who wants to expand their business. And you've heard a lot of the act as if and all these other terminologies that get thrown out there, and have coaching seminars on and all that other stuff, yada yada yada. Yet here he just simply, and if you can get a hold of this book, The Power of Awareness, and get a hold of this chapter and go into the examples, he simply states how people were able to achieve this, even moving into high-priced apartments with rent control that seemed completely out of their reach. And they just used exactly what he's been sharing with us and what we've been talking about. At one point in the story with the boy with the puppy, it's like you would think all odds were against him, because if he had gotten money to get the puppy, his parents would have used it for his college education. They would have said, no, we're not going to use it for a puppy. If it had come, sometimes we wonder, well, we don't know how it's going to come. And again, there's the how question. Yet the beauty in all of that is that it doesn't matter. The persistence and our persistence with it means it's going to come. And so in these case studies, and I think they're interesting to kind of absorb, and they're definitely useful to just challenge ourselves in our own persistence with our own assumptions. And there's even a part in there that relates to a segment that we talked about in our book, Energetic Invocations, where someone gets a better health diagnosis because there's a part where they practice imagining that they see the doctor's face expressing, amazement that they're healed and they're better. And so there's a lot of useful energy in this to propel. And it's funny because after the case histories chapter, it goes right into the chapter on failure. So we almost like you go through the training and you go, wow, and you hear all these stories and you really get the vibration. And some of these, I mean, it's funny, I don't want to go into our own personal stories, but some of these, we have talked about just, off the cuff, not reading this book, that we've done, and we didn't know we were doing it. And we have ascertained our desired goal by the law of assumption, and we probably had no idea, which is cool. Very cool.
Well, it's interesting with failure. It's, because I'm always like, I understand it. I always think of if things didn't work, why wouldn't they work? Why wouldn't they work? Because we've gotten a lot. But there's certain things in my life that I would say, that, I could do better. I could always do better. Because I think part of the goal of life, which I know he says in the very end when he gets in the last chapter, is really about doing better. It's always about doing better. And so for me, I'm going off just in a quick tangent. I saw a thing with Steve Jobs, and basically he says, you have to fail to learn. And the fact that you fail is a sign that you made a decision. And from there, that's the only way you can move forward. So I always tend to go for that. So, I'm always looking for what didn't work. Where was the failure? What can I do better? And so when I look at this, it's interesting because it says that if it didn't work, if you're using these concepts and it didn't come through, it's not because this doesn't work. It's not because the law doesn't work. It is because he says the secret of your failure has to do with how natural you feel about what you want. Meaning that if it does not feel natural to you, in his example, to get a better job, you'll not get a better job. If it doesn't feel natural, it's just not, it's not going to work. And so, of course, then I say, there's the weasel clause. There's the weasel clause. That's how you get out of it. And then as he goes further along, he says, so how can the feeling of naturalness be achieved? And of course, the secret lies in one word: imagination. And the imagination goes right into what we're talking about with all the stuff in the back about acceptance and with feeling and all the stuff that we talked about in the past. Not that I was trying to, but I always go to this, like, okay, there's something more. What if I'm really gonna, imagine something huge for myself, but I'm not sure how well I can really believe it. Well, you have to believe it. Okay, I have to believe it. But what if it doesn't feel natural for me? For instance, I'm a queen. I'm the Queen of England, right? It doesn't feel natural for me. I'm not really interested in being the Queen of England. But if I were interested in being a queen or whatever it was, how do you become more natural with it? And it's interesting because it's through the imagination, which is what we said. It's almost like we can almost go right back to chapter 1 again. And you have to work with the concepts that we talked about to do it. Which it's almost funny because it's like, well, it's almost like, well, it didn't work. Okay, you got to go back to step 1. Try it again.
And that's beautiful about the Queen of England, because you kind of set me off on a little tangent thinking about, the royal couples and the, whatever, and the new baby and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it goes back to that's why the case history chapter is great, because it goes back to the little boy with the puppy and his grandmother's yelling at him saying, you're not getting a puppy. I came here to talk to Neville Goddard for myself. This wasn't for your practice, to do this power, and have awareness. And he's like, I know how to get what I want now. And it's funny because, who knows, you could be, it seems so absurd, but you could, if you really wanted it and desired it, be the Queen of England.
I could meet a king.
Yes.
And I could get married. And
you have no idea. Yeah, you could find out you had some lineage that you had no idea. It could be through anything. And that's the beautiful part of if you don't believe and you're not kind of take it on that all this power is within you, and you read those case histories and it gives you some really good examples in all different arenas. It's fascinating. And then you go into this you're kind of hit with the stop sign here, of failure.
Well, no, actually,
but it's not in a bad way at all.
He says these errors and weaknesses can be overcome. This is an empowering statement. It's not,
and that's right, because the failure chapter isn't okay, what did you do wrong? It's not that at all. And yet nobody kind of expresses failure like that, where it could just be an error or weakness in the consciousness, but it can still be overcome.
Exactly. That's the beautiful thing about this. And who knows, maybe I will become a queen.
And the great part, the simplicity of feeling that you already are the person you want to be, and remember that the time it takes your assumption to become reality is proportionate to the naturalness of being it. And the naturalness is ascertained through the imagination.
Right.
Woo.
Right. And so then that, of course, brings us right to faith. Which, it's interesting because he talks about it. And faith, as we, I think, understand it, and this is just my, as we understand it, doesn't change. What changes is the faith is within ourselves.
Right.
It is not in an external, and not that you can't have faith in an external source if it helps you to achieve what we said with the imagination. If it helps bring a naturalness to it, it still works. That's why, when he talks about here, and of course I'm talking about God and the faith in God, and God will make this occur, and then it still works. You're still bringing the naturalness, what we just talked about, which would create failure if you didn't have a natural. If that belief that God can make this occur, it's still going to have the same benefit.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting in this chapter because the whole part about not going outside. That some being,
somebody's going to do
not going outside. That some being, that somebody else is going to provide that faith for you is huge. That's good. That you have access to faith. You have faith, and faith is, and he states it here, is the awareness of the reality of that which you assume. So the awareness is the faith. That's huge. That's completely huge, because again, you're not going outside and you're not waiting for someone to give it to you, and you're not waiting for a being to give it to you, and you're not sitting there saying, do I deserve it?
Yeah.
No.
Right.
I mean, you already have it. You already have it.
And this last thing he says, faith does not question, faith knows. And that's where the knows, what is he talking about? It knows. It's exactly what he's saying. That's being in that energy of
awareness.
Of awareness and of getting what you wanted. Mm-hmm. So I guess that leads us now into destiny. And it's interesting, because what I get as I read this is there is no destiny. And destiny is what I said earlier. It's a constantly doing more, getting more, and it's not more things. It doesn't mean you're a hoarder. It doesn't mean I get more money. There's not. The more is moving in a grander sense of this.
And he beautifully says in this statement, since life is infinite, the concept of an ultimate destiny is inconceivable. And this will take all your mythological stories and everything. It's my destiny to save the world. It's kind of,
well, if that's what you're choosing, if that's what your decision is, I would like to save the world. Well, therefore, you're going to create the situation where you're going to have to save the world, right?
Because your consciousness is the creator of your destiny. Yep, there you go.
Yep. And so, I mean, I don't know if you have anything else to say. To me, reverence is when you talk about when you're working and you're just fully in the energy, and whenever I'm doing something and I'm in the energy, and in the energy, we've talked about this in other podcasts of what does in the energy mean. Sometimes we talked about it, you kind of lose yourself, you lose sense of time, you just, what you're doing, you love it, and you just embrace it fully, and you're just in that space of almost like time stands still. That to me is the best way I can define reverence. It's just that space of everything's fine, no matter what's going on. Where you are and what you're doing is where you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to be doing. And it's in knowing that, in the sense of anybody outside saying you should be, you could have been, why don't you, how come, all of that just kind of fades into, it's almost like you're standing back and they're all like little, and you just see, you can't see what I'm doing, but it's like, and you just don't hear it. It's almost like none of that exists.
And that's a beautiful pictorial, except for the little mimi.
Yeah, I know. No one else can see. So no one saw it but you.
And when he says here, just again, I'm going to say simply, because sometimes just the simple words are the best, and the energy to it, the vibration to it. You are God. You are the I am that I am. You are consciousness. You are the creator. This is the mystery. This is the great secret known by, this is the funny part, by seers, prophets, mystics throughout the ages. And, the semblance of that gives such a humbleness to that understanding. And I think it relates to the title of the book, The Power of Awareness. Because the awareness of that is not only the faith and then the persistence, and you can go all into these concepts, building up into a higher concept of yourself that you're rising into, which is beautiful, which is very beautiful.
So, the one thing that I is interesting is, he says it is when your feeling of reverence is most intense that you are closest to God. And when you are closest to God, your life is richest. And the interesting part about that is, we all have our way of doing it. And this may have been repeated in another podcast. I know I've said this in another one. I don't know if it's in this, but, the truth of the matter is that to be able to do the work of what he talks about, you really have to really disengage from everything outside. And you and I, Julie, we just started going to these ancient texts because we did a lot of that work. We documented it in energetic invocations, and when we started looking at ourselves, we started looking at what people told us, we started looking at what society told us, what social media, corporations, the health industry, everybody's told us. And we turned it upside down and said none of this made sense. None of it made sense. And then we dug deeper, and then we started looking at our own lives, and we started saying, none of this is true. And we knew none of it was true, but it's like, what do you do with this? We didn't know what to. And so we started going deeper and deeper, and then we went into relationships, and we went into, this process that we did document in the book, Energetic Invocations. And the reason I say it, we've done a lot of podcasts that you can get for free. It's not about just, selling our book. We talk a lot about it in our energy podcasts. But it was through that, and we put out the podcast for other people to do the same thing. Because when you clear all that, you read this, to me, it's reminding myself of, okay, wait a minute, how do I do this again? I know the old stuff. I know how to go outside and have people tell me that I'm not, smart enough, good enough, whatever the story is. I've let that go. That's easy for me to go back to. I have to always remind myself, how do I stay in that empowerment when I know this? And a big part of it, which moved, because it was a huge block, we moved from one side to the other, was letting go of all of that. And this makes sense to me. Because that old stuff is gone.
Right, and this is ideally how you start. From our book, we're actually telling you how to work with energy.
Right.
And it's really funny. It doesn't come out and say that, but we're telling you how to go within and pull all of the stuff that he's talking about and use it for yourself and work with energy. And in the last chapter, when he's talking about reverence, and he's moved from faith, and that's your awareness, and you have it. You're not waiting for someone else to give it to you. He says, you can't know this intellectually. You can't debate it. And we're having a conversation, and we're sharing the spontaneous energy of this conversation, of us being in that space. And it's up to you to go propel with it. I propel with books I read, with, having these conversations, with even working in this space and doing these podcasts. You can listen to it. And he says, it's funny, we're not debating. Susan and I aren't debating each other, saying, I'm right, you're wrong, this is what I feel. This is a conversation about all these little aspects that kind of boil up out of the book, and we just start kind of throwing at each other. And a free-for-all, and, really, he says here, you can only feel it. You can only be aware of it. So you're aware of it, and, you get into the environment and the energy of, what your only to do is. And what, like you said, what the real work is. And it's very, substantial for yourself and what you want to do and where you want to go and how you want to propel ahead with that.
Thank you for listening to this production from EI Alliance. Check out our Amazon authors pages for books and podcasts. Find New Threads music and their latest album on iTunes, Spotify, and newthreads.us.